at our press conference. Our presenters will be the Deputy Leader of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, the Honourable Marcella Liburd, Chairman of the party, Dr. Terence Drew, the Honourable Konris Maynard. Those will be our three presenters for today. Also present are our candidates, Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, His Excellency Steve Wrensford, His Excellency Kenneth Douglas, and Leon Natta Nelson. Unfortunately, our comrade leader, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, will not be present at today's conference, and he sends his apologies to our listening. Please note that after each speaker has presented, after all the speakers have presented, you'll be able to direct your questions, and the questions can be directed to the speakers, the persons that presented, as well as to the other candidates. So feel free to post any questions as well on our Facebook Live page. We'll be taking your questions there also. And without any further ado, we'll hear from our first presenter, the Honourable Marcella Liburd.
A pleasant good afternoon to you, the members of the media, and to those in the listening audience who are tuning in on radio and via the internet. I would like to thank Freedom 106.5 FM, KISS 102.5 FM, and Win FM for broadcasting our press conference live for the benefit of the general public at home and abroad. As you would all be aware, the National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis has been dissolved. The outgoing Prime Minister officially advised the Governor General of this on Tuesday, May 12, 2020, and then, more than 24 hours later, at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, 13th May 2020, the Prime Minister made an official announcement to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. This course of action taken by Dr. Harris has been very unusual. He had already taken unusually long to dissolve the National House of Assembly after so many months have passed since the 5-year anniversary of the last general election on February 15th, 2015. It is also highly unusual for any Prime Minister to wait 24 hours to announce the dissolution of a National Assembly, 5 hours before the House of Assembly would have dissolved automatically on him. I also want to take this opportunity to thank those individuals and leaders within civil society who have been, in their own quiet way, non-partisan, keeping the government's feet to the fire and holding all of us accountable here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to thank them all, including the members of the clergy and the leadership of the various professional associations who have made the passionate and reasoned case for the protection of the democratic norms and values of our country and the importance of integrity in public life. In saying this, I also include myself and the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, which also forms part of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, with members on the opposition benches. I give you the assurance that we in the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party have taken your criticisms and concerns and recommendations with careful consideration, and where improvements could be made, we have sought to improve and will continue to do so. We are also extremely proud of and thankful for the interventions of the young people of this country. Over the last 5 years, I have seen unprecedented levels of political engagement by our young people, especially our young women. I am personally very happy about that. It has given me great pleasure to witness so many of them stepping forward, taking ownership and lending their voices in objective defense of truth, justice, and accountability here in St. Kitts-Nevis. It would certainly be remiss of me not to thank the members of the media who, at a time of unprecedented political persecution, have been determined to bring reasonable and balanced analysis of the pertinent issues affecting our people and our country. I thank you all for your patriotism. I thank you for standing up for our values and for taking a stake in determining the course that our country will take now and into the future. Our people are an educated and intelligent people, and that is why the course of action taken by Dr. Harris on Tuesday was so disgraceful and downright disrespectful. In every area, in every sector, the COVID-19 emergency response by the government has been woefully inadequate, with severe consequences for our people. This is in no way a reflection on the hard-working health professionals, frontline workers, and civil servants, but shows the fundamental lack of leadership and mismanagement at the very top. And I wish to pause to commend all our health professionals, frontline workers, and civil servants for their hard work. The haphazard and knee-jerk public health responses have fallen far short of the 6 conditions needed to be met to effectively manage this crisis and begin to reopen our country, which has been established by the World Health Organization. The first and second conditions for reopening are that disease transmission has to be brought under control, and our health systems are able to detect, test, isolate, and treat every case and trace every contact. Although the government has reported that 14 of the 15 COVID-19 cases have fully recovered, we do not know and will never know if the transmission of the disease has been brought fully under control until some degree of mass testing of our general population takes place. Periods of 24-hour lockdown must be connected to testing if they are to make sense and have any impact. The third most important condition is that our communities must be fully educated, engaged, and empowered to live under a new normal. This is connected to the next point that I want to make about the inadequacy of the economic stimulus package. As you would be all aware, a $120 million stimulus package was announced. Yet to date, not $1 of government funds has gone into the pockets of the people who need it most. Our pensioners, our working poor, and those who eke out a living as farmers, as fishermen, and the many others who are self-employed and not registered at Social Security. The $5 million that was injected into the PAP is still only reaching the same 4,000 persons who have always received it. the Prime Minister has yet to confirm whether 4,000 additional people who have been newly unemployed or are receiving no income are now receiving the $500 in assistance. The disbursement of the stimulus funds is not having an impact because it was poorly designed, poorly structured, poorly administered, and much of the money has been misallocated to areas that are meaningless to our people at this stage. By this, I refer to the $30 million that has been allocated to mortgage loans and the $191 million that has been allocated to construction projects. As a result of the mishandling and mismanagement of the economic stimulus package, all across the Federation are suffering. Over 5,000 people are at home, either not working or working on reduced hours. Our businesses, large and small, have seen their profits slashed by as much as 60%. The ineptitude and incompetence being demonstrated by the Harris administration at this critical stage is in danger of severely and permanently compromising the sustainable development of our country if swift action is not taken. Loss of jobs and slow economic activity could push more people into poverty and cause small businesses to close permanently. Our healthcare system, which was already under unimaginable strain, may not be able to support the general health and wellness of the population if a second wave of COVID-19 cases were to arise. While all schools have closed and lessons have moved online, unequal access to internet and access to computers have meant that many parents are not equipped with the tools they need to continue their children's education from home. This is a travesty that must be fixed, especially since it has resulted from the government's suspension of the one-to-one laptop program. It is for these reasons and more that the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party demands that a date for the general election be set immediately in order to offer predictability to the country in these hard economic times driven by the COVID-19 public health crisis. St. Kitts and Nevis cannot afford political instability in this economic crisis. It is vitally important that the economic aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic be managed by a government that has full powers to implement long-term plans and strategies that would take our country forward. This is why the upcoming general election is so critical. We are not talking about this in pursuit of our own political interests, but out of an abundance of compassion for our people. Our party wants the chance to bring an end to the suffering of our people, get our economy back on track, and put people back to work as swiftly as possible. The next-gen SKN Labour Party will rise to the new imperatives of the post-COVID environment and introduce policies such as 1, introduction of flexi hours for civil servants. 2, provide financial assistance through a form of unemployment insurance, provided either by an amended Social Security or revamped severance fund. 3, will provide soft loans and grants to small businesses to preserve employment and help them stay afloat. 4, will provide temporary payroll and other forms of support to allow small businesses to recover and to assist large companies experiencing economic difficulties to fully re-engage workers who have been laid off or who had their hours shortened. We will reduce payment of VAT, corporate income tax, and unincorporated business taxes by all businesses for a specified period. We will reduce the cost of electricity by 50% for all consumers over a specified time frame. Finally, we will also stimulate public sector construction by investing in growth-generating projects, such as the brand new Joseph and France General Hospital, highway to Whitegate, a bridge to Nevis, and the fast ferry marina in the Bay. The pathway to eradicating the COVID-19 is not going to be an easy one. This is just some of what the Next Gen SKN has to offer to our people. We are ready to put our people back to work and to bring about the post-COVID recovery of our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Marcella Liburd, for your presentation. We appreciate your candid approach as always to the facts, always delivering to the people, straight to the point, addressing the concerns and offering hope to the public. We appreciate that of you. And now we will have our next presenter, which will be the Honorable Konris Maynard.
A pleasant good afternoon to all here today, here with us, all of the different media houses, and a pleasant good afternoon to the listening public here at home and abroad. I want to say a special good afternoon to the constituents of constituency number 3, especially since it is you who gave me the opportunity to represent you in our National Assembly. But today, the Parliament stands dissolved. And in less than 90 days, there must be a general election in St. Kitts and Nevis. It is an opportunity that many of the citizens have been waiting for. An opportunity to elect a new set of persons to govern this dear country of ours. But unfortunately, we still have to endure the type of behavior that has become oh so common with the present leadership in this country. We were told on Wednesday evening by the Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Harris, that Parliament was dissolved sometime on Tuesday, more than 24 hours before. This is utter disrespect. I, for instance, as a member of Parliament, would have proceeded on Tuesday and on Wednesday as if our National Assembly was still alive. And so therefore I could have participated in activities that extend certain privileges to persons who form part of the Parliament. But more than us as parliamentarians, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis in a wholly democratic country have to be left with no information that the bastion of democracy in their country has been dissolved. I find it hard to find any similar examples in recent time. The government's purpose is to serve the people. Instead, as many have seen and observed, they have just been serving themselves and their families and close friends, blatantly disregarding the general public, especially in the first 3 or 4 years of their administration. added to the fact that the parliament was dissolved unbeknownst to people in this country. Again, in these times of uncertainty, the Prime Minister sought to add even more uncertainty by not announcing an election date. You see, in these times, a good and caring and thoughtful government would say, you know what? These are not normal times. People have to adjust their lives, their norms, their preferences. And a big decision is upon us as a nation, a decision of an election. And it would have been so good for businesses and people to be able to plan, say, a month out, 6 weeks out, that we are readying ourselves for an election in the midst of the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. That would have been thoughtful. That would have been a magnanimous position by a government. But you really can't expect a pig to fly. You really can't expect a duck to do anything other than to quack. And so it is of no surprise that Timothy Harris continues to exemplify the behavior he has over the past 5 years and even beyond. For the last 5 years, we have seen the neglect of most people except for Rawl. I know you know who Rawl is. They spoke about him or the group of people a lot before the last election. They said fair share for Rawl. We thought it was all, but it was Rawl. It was members of the Harris family, their close associates, members of their political elites, $100 million tax concession to big businesses. Those are all, but all of us here have felt some level of neglect by this government. They sought on a path of victimization. Because you see, for a government to rule who does not have the majority favor of a country, one of the important things they must do early on is to instill fear. And so Timothy Harris sought immediately to instill fear in the people of St. Kitts-Nevis. So on the very first day that they had to govern this country, civil servants were lined on the corridors of government headquarters simply because they may have been perceived to have supported the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, instilling fear. He threatened many of the radio stations that are here today, Win FM, Freedom FM, Kiss FM. He went as far as to tell us in a democratic country that you should not listen to Marcella, Liburd, that you should not listen to Dr. Denzil Douglas, that you should not listen to Konris, Maynard. Instilling fear in persons. And anyone who stepped too close to the toes of Timothy Harris was punished, removed if they could remove them, or sideline them if the laws were strong enough to prevent them from moving. Having people not working for 2 years and collecting a salary just because they perceive them to be supporters of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. That is what the last 5 years represents for this government. During these 5 years, we have seen a global example of nepotism at its highest. Before last election, many of the positions I will now call, the siblings and family members did not hold in those capacities. But after the election, the brother of Timothy Harris, Len Harris, became the CEO of Development Bank under a cloud of suspicion of his previous behavior in the bank. His sister was returned to the registrar's office as the registrar, again after having been disciplined or removed for not doing her work. His other sister became the magistrate of the court without any advertisement so that other persons may apply. the sister of the registrar, who is the husband of the registrar, who is his sister, was promoted in the Ministry of Health after the election and received back pay for the position. His nephew has been promoted to the Deputy Director of Audit, the same institution that has to audit our government. Another sister, I believe, has been promoted to the payroll manager under this last 5 years. We see his nephew, who has been promoted to the chairman of National Bank, and within a short period of time oversaw the increase of his monthly stipend as the chairman of National Bank from $3,000 to $6,500. 90% of the people in St. Kitts-Nevis do not make $6,500. But Alexis Nisbet was able to oversee the increase of his salary in the bank as chairman from $3,000 to $6,500. His wife, Akila Nisbet, was handpicked and removed out of ECCB and placed in SCASPA for an undisclosed monthly salary that to date they can show no work done over the last 4 years that she has held that position. Never mind the auspices they have by having persons go to the MRI at the monkey farm and using other medical equipment at our hospital. His brother is on the board of Social Security. A sister is on the board of SCELEC. His brother was picked to be promoted to be in charge of the prison, but he simply lacked even the basic qualifications to do so. And so he was just promoted to the next best available position over others. We have seen ministers who could not pay their mortgage properly before the last election now be able to renovate homes to the tune of millions of dollars while claiming they are operating on a half of a salary. Establishing concrete businesses such that the only projects that are taking precedence today are those that involve concrete. Not people, concrete. So they have been benefiting while the general public has been struggling in many quarters. Meanwhile, during this pandemic, it has come to the fore about the plight of our nurses, many who have gone off to study, who have come back and expect to receive the benefits of their degrees. But only now, on the eve before elections, this 5-year government can remember to do something for our nurses. A last-minute thought that is even amplified by the fact that it appears the ministry completely forgot International Nurses Day, while the members of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party Next Gen team went out and about to show appreciation to our nurses in every facility nurses operate across this country. And there are others, especially in our civil service, who need to be looked at. They have been scrambling after 5 years of focusing on themselves to try to make an impression on the people that they have neglected. They think and have held that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis are puppets, that they can push back and forth as they please. Neglect them for now, but then try to give a sugar cake just before the elections. We are confident in the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party Next Gen SKN that our policies of all inclusiveness for advancing social and human capital and optimizing social care and protection will foster a more just and serene nation. It is time for a proper review of compensation in our civil service. We have already stated that payments will be made twice per month, but we want to look at the scales to ensure that people are being paid commensurate with their qualifications and the workload that they have. In agriculture, the COVID-19 has shown us the importance that we must become more self-reliant on our own food. But beyond that, we must be creative and ingenious in order to create a pathway that we can make money not just from our own food that we can sell, but also other things that we can do in agriculture, such as the growth of cannabis. We need to look at this, and we have committed to creating that industry such that our farmers and our persons here who have been involved in cannabis production to have an opportunity to be on the world stage providing a world booming product. We will look at the facilitation of cannabis-based research, innovation, commercial projects, subject to all of the ethical standards, ensuring that we safeguard our children and disadvantaged persons. We will ensure that our homegrown benefits. So as I close, ladies and gentlemen in the public, from adult suffrage to the current day, we in the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party have fought for the rights of our people, and we will continue to do so. Over the past 4 years, our party has taken the time to restructure and rebrand. We are indeed next gen. And if it is one silver lining that comes out of COVID-19, is that it has provided a lens that the country can look through and observe in fine detail which of their choices is best for them. The St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party has shown our agility, our flexibility, our creativity to maneuver in times of crisis, time and time again, and COVID-19 is no different. So we are good, or it is a good thing, that we have an outstanding leader who has taken the time to put together a next-gen SKN team that was carefully selected through democratic processes and presently being groomed to lead. This is why our party has put together these candidates of youthful, or made up of youthful, mature and seasoned servants of the people who will work diligently to help to take this country to the next level. We are an outstanding, highly motivated, capable and committed group of professionals with a proven record of service who have continuously rolled up our sleeves and have been always ready to work for you. I speak of people like Dr. Jeffrey Hanley. We don't have to say much. He has been in the communities forever. If it is anyone who knows how to roll up his sleeves and clean, even at the hospital, or people who are sick in their homes, it would be Jeffrey Hanley, a servant of the people. We speak none other than our royal lady, the Honorable Marcella Liburd, who from the days of leading St. Kitts-Nevis to regional championships have taught our people in schools, have helped our families in court, have been an activist in the community on behalf of women's rights, has been a champion in the bastion of our democracy in the parliament. I speak of none other than Steve Wrensford in constituency number 4, who all of his life has been focused on helping people, of building communities, such that he landed in the social security, which is the basic example of serving people's needs, especially during work in times and after they would have worked. I speak of persons like Kenny Douglas in constituency number 5, who for many years before he entered politics, I heard about his community service. He has led small schools to big championships. He has taken groups of men and made them regional stars in cricket and football. He has traveled the world healing our athletes as we participate in big world events. A man of the people, a humble soul, whose students who have been under his tutelage say they would rather have nobody else to be their teachers. I speak of none other than Leon Natter Nelson, and we must include winning Natter Nelson, who, even if we start from now and go backwards, we see the gigantic leaps that he has taken to take on a government such that a court will say that you have stood up for the rights of all civil servants, such that they can associate with whomever they want in protection of their rights in our Constitution. Or I can go further back many years ago, when he would be in the communities with the footballers and basketballers, in community groups, being an activist in the community, step by step, with disadvantaged youths and others alike. I speak of Dr. Terence Drew, the caring doctor, who, by the way, was a teacher of mine in high school. Since then, he has been serving people. He's a bright fellow, wanted to do engineering, I think. But then he had a dream, I guess, or a vision, that he wanted to go more in depth and be a part of God's healing power across this world. And so he went into medicine, being involved in the community at every level, starting clubs, leading clubs. And to this day, Dr. Drew remains a force in our community. He has always been there. I speak of persons like myself, who from a tender age in my church, being a leader among youth groups, being a leader in our boys brigade, being a leader in the community, mentoring, helping, bringing young men together in activities that they enjoy, speaking on behalf of the community, singing on behalf of the community, representing a community long before thinking of entering politics. I speak of none other than people like Dr. Denzel Douglas, who, as a young baby, lost the love of his mother. But there was a destination for him to travel. And he traveled it to the point where he became the foremost prime minister in the Commonwealth of countries across the globe. His record is unmatched in service. He traveled to become a doctor. A government victimized him. He had to sort ways in order to help him finish studying. Came home, was able to have one of the largest practices where he helped thousands of persons when they couldn't afford basic medicine or basic healthcare service. He became the Prime Minister of St. Kitts-Nevis and led us to #1, and has given the commitment to lead us, this next gen group of candidates, into government once again, to train us, to show us the way, to guide us, such that, as he has said, when he is ready to depart, you can have confidence that you have strong, well-trained persons to take over the leadership of our country. And all of this shows that our efforts have been all about you. That is what this Next Gen SKN Dream Team is about. All about you. We serve you out of genuine love and compassion for the good that we can do. I thank you.
Thank you to the Honorable Konris Maynard the Powerhouse representative for #3. Thank you for offering your words of encouragement and wisdom to the people. You have never been shy about speaking out against injustice, and that is very much appreciated by many. Our next presenter would have been Dr. Terence Drew, but unfortunately he had to address a medical emergency, so he won't be able to present today. So our final presenter will be none other than His Excellency Steve Wrensford, a representative for number 4.
Thank you, Adelcia, and good afternoon to the listeners via the various media platforms. And a special good afternoon to the constituents of constituency number 4. Today is a day of continuing celebration of the dissolution of the Parliament, paving the way for general elections shortly. We want people to know, with the dissolution of Parliament, persons have realized that this is the time. This is the time more than ever for them to showcase how disappointed they are with the current regime and how badly they would want change. The dissolution of Parliament is the first step towards a better St. Kitts under the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. And I want the people to understand that they must utilize this opportunity to ensure that change comes to St. Kitts and Nevis with the election of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. Despite the many attempts by the Harris regime over the past 5 years, and recently to go around the Constitution, and their attempts to use COVID-19 as a reason to delay the elections, all these attempts have failed. They have failed because of the strength of our Constitution, the direct and implicit writing of our Constitution, and it shows that it stays, our Constitution remains supreme in this land. The rule of law has prevailed, and given, as I said before, the many desperation and tactics of this Harris regime, we are here today to say, be ready to exercise your voting finger and ensure that St. Kitts is returned to Labour, and St. Kitts and Nevis will remain strong under a Labour administration. I want to say to the people of St. Kitts that the many programs that the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party has for St. Kitts and Nevis, one stands out clearly, and that is our nurses. Our nurses have been on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party want to assure the nurses that our focus in a new administration will be on improving areas not limited to general nursing, specialist nurses, emergency medical response, mental health, and diagnostic services. We will enhance the services provided at our health centers to include the availability of lab tests, medications, physical therapies, and DMO services. This is what a next-gen healthcare system and universal healthcare policy will do for the people of this country of St. Kitts and Nevis. We are proud of our track record of spearheading health services in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have done this through holistic and comprehensive policies and services, and this will be done and continued under a next-gen SKN Labour Party team. You will experience a complete overhaul of our healthcare system. Changes will not only occur within our medical centers, but also within the overall cleanliness of our communities. In addition, I want to give assurance to the people that Labour will reassign responsibility for roadside drain cleaning to the Solid Waste Management Corporation and resource public works to improve and expand maintenance of guts and storm drains. It will be a complete revamping of our healthcare system under Labour's next-gen SKM administration. As we all know, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. When it comes to national security, Labour believes that regarding human rights, democracy, and citizenship, all should be inculcated within everyone. This contributes greatly to the benefit of all spheres of human interactions: the family, business, politics, cultural celebrations, religion, and education. Efforts to promote justice, peace, and prosperity are most effective in a society rooted in positive and affirming values. Labour believes St. Kitts-Nevis can be such a society, one recognized by collective commitment to cooperation, responsibility, excellence, accountability, and respect for self and others. The safety and security of our citizens is of paramount importance to all of us. It is one of our most pressing concerns. So Labour understands that the high level of crime and violence are a threat to health and development. We believe that crime fighting demands the involvement of all stakeholders across the Federation to effectively combat criminal activities in our country. Our next-gen SKN will restructure the police force and incentivize our police officers to effect full restorative change within our Federation. We will employ more focused deterrence policing, which will target specific issues affecting the communities. This strategy would require strong community and law enforcement camaraderie. The idea is to rebuild communities' trust in our police officers, and we will also ensure that crime statistics are published quarterly for public scrutiny and ensure the use of drones is properly regulated to safeguard and enhance the security of residents. In agriculture, the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party values all sectors of the economy. Agriculture remains one of the essential areas. The former Labour administration constructed the fisheries complex in Bastia and the fisheries complex in Old Road, and also upgraded the abattoir, which led to a massive increase in beef and pork production within the Federation. Labour believe that we must produce our food. We have always actively supported and facilitated food production efforts in the farming and fishing sectors, and the next-gen SKN Labour administration will facilitate the increased local food production within our Federation. Our public market in Bastia is the major hub for many farmers and fishermen. And so we will redesign the public market in a manner that will be more attractive to the customer and also be more efficient to those who are selling their produce. It will become part of a local network of commercialized farmers' markets to be conveniently located throughout the Federation. And I have said to the constituents of number 4 that there will be a farmers' market in Old Road. So that is part of the plan. We will link farmers to government institutions and aggressively pursue new production and sales opportunities, including export where possible. And so, in a few weeks, Labour will be returned to government. And we will give duty-free concessions to all registered farmers and fishermen or fisherwomen and farmers who are ladies or men. It is the hope of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party that you will become a focal point in food production and food security of our nation. In a few weeks, when Labour is returned to government, we will see a major turnaround in this country. Advancement in health, education, housing, advancement as a country as a whole, and really advancement in the financial sector, because it is all about you, and finance is the oil to making a country run and the people happy with a government that cares for you. It's all about you, and the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party is ready to serve you, and when it is returned, you are assured of a healthy and uplifting and empowerment experience under the Next Gen SKN Labour Party team. Thank you, and good afternoon.
Thank you. He's Steve Wrensford, His Excellency Steve Wrensford, for such an informative presentation. You have definitely outlined effortlessly the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party's plans and how, once elected, we will develop a federation with the various plans and policies and how they will benefit all people. The floor is now open to the press. Remember that questions are welcome from all listening via social media. Please be sure to type your questions into the comments field, and we will relay your questions to the relevant candidates. Okay, so first question from our press.
Good afternoon, everyone. Precious Mills from the Labour spokesman. First question. In regard to the Parliament being dissolved, is there a protocol to inform members formally, and has the opposition been notified? Oh, sorry. Okay, in regard to Parliament being dissolved, is there a protocol to inform members of the Parliament formally, and has the opposition been notified? Number two, what status can be provided at this point as it relates to concerns at the electoral office? Number three, what can the public expect of the Next Gen SKN campaign considering COVID-19 challenges among other issues? Fourth question is on the topic of politics. The government has often said that it is putting the country's health first. What will the opposition say about this? Is there any observations you have made?
Okay, I have a series of questions. First off, in the presentation by the Honorable Marcella Liburd, you mentioned a number of tax cuts and initiatives are geared towards benefiting citizens and residents in St. Kitts-Nevis should the Labour Party be returned to office at the end of the next election. But one, how are you going to fund a number of these initiatives? Are you aware of what amount, what value or percentage is left in these consolidated funds? One. And two, there's going to be a shortfall in terms of revenue from these cuts that are being proposed. How is the government, or how is the Labour Party proposing to fill that shortfall of revenues when you're looking to cut a number of taxes? Second question. A number of charges were leveled against the former government, opposition now. Can you just give us an update in terms of where, if you or anybody in the party is aware of where those charges are? For example, we heard a number of breaches at the investigations being launched at the electoral office. We only saw one person being brought before the court. And there are a number of other charges that were leveled. For example, we heard about squandering of funds being given to family members under a specific program. Fast forward to 2020, we have not heard anything coming out of those allegations that were leveled against members of the party as well as former officials in the government. Additionally, my final question for now. Sometime back, a question was asked of the Labour Party concerning allegations of the monkey farm, and that is the MRI machine being used there. The Labour Party had indicated, maybe 2015, 2016, thereabout, that an MRI was actually purchased while the Labour Party was in government, and it was stuck in Florida, and allegations were made against the current administration for not assisting in bringing that MRI to St. Kitts-Nevis. Can you just give us an update in terms of where exactly it is and how do you guys go forward in actually having that MRI be brought to St. Kitts-Nevis? Those are my questions for now.
Okay, we will have Honorable. But she will be responding to the first question asked.
Third question from Precious. As far as I'm aware, there is nothing to say any special procedure as to how Parliament should be dissolved. But if you're dissolving Parliament, whatever form it takes, it goes to reason that, remember, Parliament is the people's house. This is not Harris's house. It is the people's house. And so if that is being dissolved, whatever form it takes in terms of the notice, it must immediately be put to the people that the house is being dissolved, whatever form it takes. And that, I think, would serve to inform everybody. But in this case, that is what makes it so despicable and disrespectful. We dissolved the House on Tuesday. I would have to guess, that the parliamentarians on the government side would have known that the House was dissolved on Tuesday. But we on the opposition benches didn't know until more than 24 hours later. Clearly you would see that unfair practice, and to me it's just typical of how the whole 5 years went in terms of having unfairness and injustice throughout, and it's down to the very end. So again, it's the people's house, and so if you're dissolving the people's house, the people should know. You can't dissolve the people's house and then decide, okay, when I feel like I will tell them. That's not how it works. It doesn't work so in any country, probably except only in St. Christopher. In terms of the concerns at the electoral office, we are deeply concerned about the whole electoral office process, because throughout we have been talking about all of the illegalities and the shenanigans that are taking place there, and we have not had anything said to us that could bring us any comfort. So we are still deeply concerned. And then when you look at the laws generally that are being breached by the government, what makes you think that whatever laws that apply to electoral office will not be breached as well? There's a general callousness and recklessness about the way the government goes about things. And I personally have had some experience, bad experience at the electoral office that to this date has not been addressed. And maybe it's time for the public to know that the objection hearings that were held last year for Central Bastille, I attended every single one of them. The last set were held in May of 2019. This is May of 2020. And to date, there's been no report coming out of those objection hearings. And we have asked on more than one occasion for the report. But there were persons who received letters to say that as a result of those objection hearings, a decision was taken to remove their names from the list, and if they didn't appeal within 7 days, their names would be removed. We immediately moved to appeal. All of them moved to appeal. To date, those appeals have not come up in the court system. Their names are still on the list. And you might ask, well, why? But do you know why? Because we discovered that the registration officer for Central Bastille, the person who heard those objection hearings, never made any recommendation at all for any name to be removed. Never made any recommendation. Think about that. So the question now becomes, who is it that could have written those letters to persons to tell them that as a result of the objection hearing, their names would be removed, when the registration officer, who is the only person who could write such a letter, had made no recommendation at all for names to be removed? Who would have done that? So again, you tell me why we should have any confidence. So the only reason why their names remain is because they know that if that matter went to the court, what would happen? The fraud that is taking place down there would be revealed. Because we discovered, as I said, that the registration officer who heard those cases never made any recommendation at all for the removal of the names. So who would have removed them? Who in the electoral office would have written to remove those names? So that is a perfect example of why we say we are very much concerned about what is taking place at that electoral office. Thank you.
Thank you to the persons who would have asked the question or questions. One of the questions I wrote down here was the next-gen campaign style. How will you go about campaigning in this new era? Now, it is very clear for the world to see, not only St. Kitts, how quickly the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party has been able to adapt to what is our new norm. We were the first to completely occupy the virtual space. We have been the only one who has kept a constant engagement with the electorate through many different forms. I remember specifically receiving a call many weeks before the Labor Day weekend saying, Konris, do you think they're going to have the country locked down for Labor Day? Do you think they're trying to stop us from having a march? I told the person and I reassured them, regardless of what happened for Labor Day, the Labour Party will be ready to do something. And we went out and perhaps had one of the first virtual marches in the Caribbean and maybe even the world, where people on the next day called us and said that they had never felt so tired in their life after a march. They had to sleep extra hours because everywhere they had to follow up on this here. A new video come in. This person in New York, you hear what they say? Let me call you up. You see what this person said? You don't send your video or going outside, go do mine. Completely engaged, completely involved. Such that we had an excellent showing on Labor Day in support of our workers in this country. That gives you a signal of how we can reinvent ourselves to adapt to the times. And so the campaign that is ahead is going to be one like no other before. And you can be rest assured that we will continue to find creative and innovative ways to keep in contact with the electorate. Yesterday we had a small little drive-through, but the whole of St. Kitts and Nevis knows about that drive-through and know exactly what happened. The whole world knows. Because, again, we were innovative with that. Someone also said that the government is saying that they're putting the country and health first and politics after. Now, who really believe that with this government? Winnie, you believe that? Who believe that? Who believe that Timothy Harris is putting health first in his decisions, such that he could not wait for the opportunity in a speech to start to say, scheme disunity again? Because it's not your government, you know. He thinks that it is his government. And so everything that they have been doing has been political. And because they have not put the health and the country first, it is why they were late in closing the borders. It is why they have still not properly disseminated a true package for stimulus here in this country. It is why they cannot decide, let us have a known election date. It is why, even in a situation like this where there was nothing else stopping him, no court case he was waiting on or anything like that, had to let the parliament come down to the wire. Because his consumption right now is strictly politics. Anything about the investigations? Let me put it like this. If Steve Wrensford, a member of our team, swat a fly and that was illegal, he would be in jail, locked away. Because there is a case there, he killed the fly and is against the law, I'm going to do everything that I could to get him in prison. Look at the liberties they took with some members of our team when they did not renew licenses on time. Look at how they put a police officer on the bench after he would have driven Dr. Denzel Douglas, Marcella, and myself on the parade square for independence. Look at how, because he did not have the ability to be above himself and give Dr. Douglas a diplomatic passport, they took that to the drains to wring it out, to just be able to boast that Dr. Douglas had to vacate his seat a few weeks before we all had to vacate our seats. So my point is that if there was anything with those investigations, it would not have taken this government 5 years to give you a report. So you must know that those things were all for show. All the claims they would have made were all for show. Nothing was there. Dr. Joe is not here. He's the guy who is most up to date on the MRI situation. I cannot recall if we said that it was paid for or it was ready to come, right? I don't know where I stand if monies were expended, but the process I know was already done and it was just to fulfill it. So I don't know about that. And then the tax cuts, how are we going to pay for them? Look, our country is facing an unprecedented time. And people are going to be struggling. I'm going to use other places just for an example. The United States has one of the largest growing national debts in the world. Trillions of dollars. But you're going to see big businesses and small businesses alike who have billions or had billions of dollars in revenue and in savings and so on say that we are going to need help. And the government is going to make a decision. Do I try to preserve any revenue that I have now and let everything else fail? Or will I use the strength that I have as a government to ensure that my sectors stay afloat, because the government is the one that has the ability to recover? Now, our plans for stimulating the economy through, for instance, increasing investor confidence would go a significant way in terms of bolstering our ability to have the number of tax cuts that we would have. And some of them that you talk about are actually net positive. For instance, we want to encourage people to get into small businesses. Sometimes right now people are doing it without licenses, without the proper facilities. So they're not paying the government any tax anyway. So someone who has a brilliant idea and so on, etc., right now they're not paying the government tax. So we're not losing that. But the innovative way that we've said is, look, we want to bring you on board. We want to be able to train you. We want to give you resources such that you can build yourself over the next year or so. We won't charge you any taxes. You don't have to pay any application fees. You come up, you provide the service, you start to make income, and then we can look at a reasonable tax that will be applied to your particular business, a net positive. And so these are the kind of ideas that we've been looking at of how we can end up in a net positive situation. But remembering that our goal as a government is to ensure that the fabric of our economic structure stays afloat, and doing all that we can to be able to handle that. So I think that those were the questions that I could address from the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Questions I have pertain to two issues. One, the COVID-19 and the government's response. Ms. Liburd, you would have indicated that there were shortcomings from the government's response, and you mentioned that there will be consequences to be expected from these shortcomings. If you could outline some of the consequences you expect to see as a result of the shortcomings. I think you outlined some of the challenges or the shortcomings you saw from the government. The other issue has to do with the elections. Considering that we are in a pandemic and there are certain social distancing restrictions, what are some of the recommendations you think should be coming from the electoral office? Or how do you see this election being conducted? Because obviously it won't be business as usual. And finally, on the issue of the stimulus package, I missed that part. Okay, I'll leave it for those two for now.
Let me first briefly respond to something I think my friend from WinFM asked that wasn't touched. He spoke about charges leveled against the former administration, and I think you spoke specifically to something that was being done at the electoral office. And I noted here SIDF, but I know there are lots of others. Right? Again, it's a clear indication of who we are dealing with. At the time, it was good to say that the Labour government was involved in all sorts of corruption and all the other things that were being said at 2015, and they were going to investigate all of these things. There are two things. One, I think they knew they would get no result, which they've gotten. 5 years, we haven't heard anything about the investigations at the electoral office. We haven't heard anything about the investigations at SIDF. And one of the strategies that the government used all along, especially in their time now, whenever something came up, like the stem cell, they would say, we're carrying out an investigation to shut up people. But up to now, there's been no investigation, there's going to be none. Because that is how they operate. So I think that it completely vindicates the Kitts-Nevis Labour Party of anything to do with the electoral office or SIDF or any of those matters that they were speaking about. But the sad thing is that we had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, the country, because they brought in forensic this and forensic that, and so on, which is good. These forensic people, I don't think they cost 2 cents. So hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent to carry out all these investigations. It's clear to me that if they had something that they could say, the Labour Party, did you think they would have been quiet on it? Dr. Harris? Would he have been quiet on it? 5 years gone. Nothing, except that we spent all this money. And up to now, nothing has been put to the public. We have already dissolved our house. Nothing has been put to the public. And so that is why we think that his feet has to be continually held to the fire. Because, again, these things are said just out of politics. And you waste taxpayers' money, and at the end of the day, you don't even have the courtesy to produce a report, having brought in all these forensic experts, according to him, to deal with matters of this nature. With respect to the consequences of the COVID response, that is woefully short of what it should be, put them into two broad categories. First of all, economic consequences. If you go around the streets and you listen to people who are supposed to be benefiting from a stimulus package as a result of this COVID, you can then come to your own conclusion. But ours is that more and more people will fall into poverty because $1,000, with the greatest respect, cannot provide for families, even if they got $1,000. Many of them are not getting that. Some people are getting nothing at all, as I pointed out in the presentation. It's only yesterday I spoke to a lady who owns a private preschool who is saying to me she is just suffering badly because they're not included. Many categories of persons are not included in the stimulus package, as I pointed out. They fall outside the package. And so they get nothing at all, even when they go down and try to make a case for themselves. And as I said repeatedly, that should not be the case, because the stimulus should cover all affected persons. So she has a private preschool. She gets nothing from the stimulus package. Schools are closed. She don't know when the schools are going to be reopened. So she has none of the students coming out, and that is how she gets paid, from when the children come out on a daily basis. So now she gets no income, but she says to me, I have to keep paying the rent. She said, I have to find a way to keep paying the rent, because if she doesn't pay the rent and schools reopen, where would she be? That is how she makes her living. And so people are in this situation where slowly but surely they're falling into poverty. The care packages that we give out on a daily basis, I could tell you, some of the persons who have given the care packages to are people who would never be in need of a care package, because before they were independent. They were able to provide for themselves and their families. At this point in time, they are not able to do so. So again, the consequences, one of it is more and more people will fall into poverty. The second broad consequence has to do with health, and also with the reopening of our economy. The two things going hand in hand, as I pointed out. How do you reopen an economy? We want to have our footballers playing again. We want to have our sports people out there. We want to have our schools open. We want to have our restaurants and so on open. How much confidence would you have as a parent if they said they're reopening the country, and up to now there's been let me put it this way, there's been no aggressive move to test? How would you feel? Do you feel comfortable that you can't take your child and send them back to school when there's been no policy by this government of aggressive testing? To me, the only how we'll be able to know the true status, or any close to that, of where we are with this virus is if there is a policy of aggressive testing in the country to get a true picture. That is clearly not being done. And so that, of course, can have woeful effects on us as a country and make us very uncomfortable as a people to be able to resume our work life. Right now, for example, they're saying that some people must go back out to work. I've spoken to many mothers who say, what is going to happen to my children? That's how unprepared it is. What's going to happen? Especially the young children like who would be in nurseries and preschools. Those are closed. So when a young mother has to go out to work, what does she do with her children who go to nurseries and preschools? What does she do with them? No thought at all put into those matters. No thought. So those are some of the consequences that I would speak about.
Is the testing aspect. The chief of staff of the Geneva Hospital, Dr. Wilkinson, had said that he's been asked the question several times, why not have mass testing? He said it's not practical. His last response to that was, this week, was that until there's a reliable antibody test that's made available that they can do mass testing, it would be impractical and difficult for them to do mass testing at this point in time. How do you respond to that?
I understand that is his response, but what is the response of every other country? Every other country, there is no place in the world that has what you would call a really reliable test, but everybody is testing. Because at least you have some that are reliable enough to give you fairly good results. So if you're going to be waiting for that, well, we're going to be locking down the country all the time? Look at what is happening in all the other countries. You have a lot of criticism of some of the testing in the United States, but the testing, England, Germany, all of those people all over the world are testing. Because that's the only way you could reliably reopen your country. So what are we waiting for? We have to also find a way to use what are the best tests that are available at this point in time, which all the other countries are doing, by the way. So I don't understand really why we would have to be waiting for this, I don't know, overall test that will be the best test ever. This is something that is new. It's a new pandemic. And there was no answer to it really. So everything is going to be relatively new. And so people are doing the best that they can do in the circumstances, but they're testing. And that is what is being done all over the world. So what is wrong with us here in St. Kitts-Nevis? And my question to a follow-up question to that would be, so are we going to open the country without any testing and just put people back out there? I don't think that is something that would be very advisable. And I want to say that we in the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party will have a policy of aggressive testing. You may not be able to test every single person in the country, even though St. Kitts is a small place. But there must be aggressive testing so that people have more confidence in the reopening of the country. So that would be really my response to that.
Two questions. One, what is the Labour Party's position on reopening St. Kitts and Nevis in light of the fact that CARICOM has basically given an indication that, hey, look, we're looking at the 4th of June as a possible reopening of at least for intra-regional travel. And just one question outside of that. As from a legal perspective, can you just, Konris has articulated it somewhat before. He was on Inside Voices recently. But what exactly is the party's position when it comes to the issue of the boundaries? Because that has been a ticklish issue. Because right now the public wants to know, am I going to the polls to vote on 2015 boundaries, or am I going to vote on the boundaries that were passed in Parliament just before elections in 2015? Can you just speak to that?
About the reopening the country or not, 4th of June or whatever you said, CARICOM said. Dr. Timothy Harris is supposed to be the lead spokesperson for CARICOM on health. All throughout this pandemic, he was supposed to be. Notice I'm saying supposed to be. Because he did not attend the critical meetings. They said they're interested in health. And health was a first priority. But he did not attend the critical meetings that dealt with that pandemic. So whatever positions CARICOM took, he probably heard about them like we heard. But he was supposed to be leading. Instead, Mayor Motley had to take the lead in those matters, and he would have had no input in them. Because in that first meeting, he sent the Honorable Sean Richards, who was at the meeting, and said absolutely nothing. Could you imagine you're coming and representing the country that is supposed to be the lead spokesperson for health, and you're saying nothing in a meeting dealing with a pandemic? The second meeting, he sends Vance Amory to the meeting, and my understanding is that the one question Vance Amory asked had absolutely nothing to do with health. We're not serious. So the point I'm making is, CARICOM has taken certain positions, but we in St. Kitts and Nevis, we only heard them, by the way. Have you ever heard Dr. Timothy Harris or anybody in that COVID thing address CARICOM's position, where we stand in regards to that? So, where are we really? When I hear about CARICOM, I hear it from other people, not here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we are supposed to be the lead country on health, because that is the portfolio in CARICOM that our Prime Minister is supposed to be holding. When it comes to the boundaries, we have said, I think, the Honorable Konris Maynard, not honorable no more, right? Konris Maynard, Konris Maynard has said over and over. I think the question you're asking, with respect, my friend, you're asking the wrong party. Because that case is a case brought by the people who were currently in the government, and after the government changed in 2015, they were on both sides of that matter. Because they were the claimants in the matter, and when the government changed, they also practically became the defendants in the matter. So they were on both sides of the matter. And for 5 years, they have sat down on that case and done absolutely nothing. They're on both sides, and they did nothing. So I think that that question would be best asked to them. We, for our part, feel that we're leaving it to the lawyers and the legal people. What we would say to our people is that whatever boundaries they bring, we're ready.
Ms. Liburd, I haven't responded to the one about the yes for elections.
Any recommendations for an election or a state of emergency? Okay. That's it, right?
Yes, thank you. The question, if I understand it, is, are there any recommendations for conducting an election under social distancing under a state of emergency? Well, the first recommendation is, the government should vacate itself and put the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party in charge. But that can't happen because we're in a democracy and we have to choose the people to sit in Parliament and make up the government. But I made a note when you asked that question, although I was not necessarily one to, I thought I was going to be answering, that wouldn't this be a lovely time for the political parties from all around, not government anymore, not opposition anymore, but the political parties to effectively agree on how we proceed with the elections. That we agree, for instance, that there will be 6 feet markings, that there will be, for instance, all facilities must remain open, that we will consult with the health experts to see what, how the different areas should be organized. And that really should have happened a long time ago, when we could go to the Parliament and legislate those differences. Because right now, as we are a country governed by laws, there is a National Assembly's Election Act which specifies what happens at a polling station. It tells you what type of pencil should be used. It tells you what the polling agents can or cannot do. It gives you distances that you have to stay away from polling stations. It goes through step by step everything that has to happen at a polling station. But we have lost that opportunity because the Parliament has now dissolved. And so it would have been the best thing to do to have the political parties who were going to be engaged in a general election to have at least suggested some of these things. So we continue to emphasize the basic things that we know. Obviously, we have to have an election where persons, the distances between persons are maintained. The government must ensure, for instance, that every person within the polling area, as you are supposed to, is provided with a mask. For instance, it is very easy to say, get 100,000 surgical masks prepared for election day, such that you are given a mask as you enter, right? And then provide disposal facilities when you leave, so you can get rid of that and maybe go back to your own. There must be an effort, of course, to have mass hand sanitizers or alcohol of the required alcohol level at different dispensing sites at a polling station. The other thing I want to point out at this time is the short-sightedness of Timothy Harris and his government. After the last election, or just before the last election, before the last election, the government had passed some legislation that allowed security personnel to vote early, the day before. Now, we don't say that everything was perfect about the bit of legislation, but it had foresight in order to allow at least those sectors of our countries not to be strained on a single election day. In democracy, for instance, in the United States, there are many options for persons to vote many, many months before. And people can choose to exercise that, especially if they know they will not be available at the time. So it lacked foresight for them to go in immediately as they took office to repeal that law. So now everybody in a COVID-19 situation, all essential workers, all police officers, nurses, doctors, etc., they have to now vote on just that polling day. It shows the lack of foresight of this government. So with those recommendations and suggestions, there are many others as well, but it would have been nice that there was a formal way that political parties can make suggestions as to how we go about conducting an election under these particular conditions. The mic. Sorry, yes, the mic.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. Is the Labour Party open to meeting with the elections office, electoral commission, to put those recommendations forward ahead of the elections so that the tri-party can actually agree, or both sides can agree to those recommendations you're actually putting forward?
Right, so the Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, first of all, is always willing to promote democracy. Presently, we do have an electoral commission, and we do have a representative appointed to that commission. So if the electoral office is serious, or the electoral commission, headed by its chair, is serious about looking at ensuring that we have a smooth elections, this is something I think you ought to put to them. Whether or not they will create the facility to allow for recommendations from all political parties and come together on a unified position of how the election should be conducted. Because we do not want a situation where the government is going to decide that this is what we're going to do because we are under a state of emergency. And then it puts opposing political parties at a disadvantage. For instance, we hear that the government is advising that people can contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if you want to come home. So are we sufficiently confident that there will not be a screening process? That because your name is X Maynard, well, let me not say X because I actually have an uncle named X. Let me use Y Maynard, right? So you see on the list wants to come home, and you make a political decision that Y Maynard going to give a vote for Konris Maynard, so you're not qualified to come home. So that is why it's going to be very critical for us to have some independent verification of the rules going forward for an election under COVID-19. Well, I'm not getting into those technicalities at the moment. Those are, you know, we want a situation where we can know what procedures we'll be operating under. Whether it is we make suggestions, obviously these things would have had to go into our parliament. So we don't know what is going to happen. No, for instance, the electoral commission or the supervisor of election can say, you know what, to pick up all the ballots, I'm going to use my personal vehicles to do that. Or to, I'm going to start the poll at 8 a.m. and close it at 4. They can't make those decisions. We have to go to the parliament. And if you haven't heard, the parliament is dissolved. I know they can't go back, but why would they have to?
Okay, well, for the sake of time, we are unable to hear from our other candidate members, but so we'll have to wrap up at this time. Thank you to the press for coming out and asking your questions, to Freedom 106.5 for carrying us live on the air, and the KISS 102.5 FM. We appreciate you for that, and also to Win FM. We appreciate you for that. And the press members that are present, SKN Newsline, Labour spokesman, again, Win FM, and the St. Kitts-Nevis Observer, thank you for coming out. Be sure to tune in this evening. We have our karaoke happening this evening at 7 p.m. live on the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party Facebook page. So those who are ready to carry your own tune in at 7 o'clock. We're looking forward to having some fun with you. Thank you once again. And yes, to the countdown. The countdown continues tomorrow morning at 9, also on the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party Facebook page. Thank you once again. Stay safe and remember to practice the security measures.